let's get started with our first panel session. It is my pleasure to welcome the Seafood and Gender Equality Group, also known as SAGE. It was created with the mission to uplift, amplify, and integrate diverse voices in the global seafood sector to build a more resilient industry. We have Julie Kuchapatov who is the founder of SAGE. Some of you may remember her as the keynote speaker of our first event, our first WINNA Summit in 2022. So I'm looking forward to her return to our platform to tell us more about her work and how it's grown since. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start my video now. Thanks so much for having me, Jean, and thank you so much for the Women in North American Aquaculture Summit organizers and sponsors. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you for bringing your team with us today. Yes, over to you.
Good. Let's go. Let's do this. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So can everybody see my screen? Just maybe a quick thumbs up. That's great. I'm really excited to be here again. My name is Julie Kuchapatov, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the founder of Seafood and Gender Equality, or SAGE for short. Again, thank you for having us today, and I'm really excited to be here again. As Jean mentioned, this is the second time participating in the summit, so I'm really excited. So today we'll share a few of the challenges and opportunities in the sector as they relate to gender equality, tell you what SAGE is doing to build a more equitable and inclusive seafood sector. And as I mentioned, I'm Julie, and I'm joined by my colleagues at SAGE, Becca Williams, who's the Director of Gender Strategies, and our program analyst, Cameron Moore. And they will share about two of SAGE's programs. And then we're also joined by Daisy Berg, who is the Seafood Program and Category Manager at New Seasons, which is a retailer in Portland, Oregon, which where I'm based, but actually I'm in DC right now, so I'm on East Coast time. And Daisy will share about the work that she does at a retailer that has a significant commitment to sustainable products and her experiences as a woman in this industry. And she'll also speak to the evolution of the industry and the opportunities for change. And then we'll have a short discussion and time for some questions and answers. I'm actually going to move this toolbar over here. Sorry, one second. There we go. Wondering if that's in the way. Hold on one second. Just gonna a little technical thing here. Okay, there we go. So before I begin, I just really want to set the stage and be very clear that when we refer to women, it's with deliberate acknowledgement and embrace of the diverse spectrum that gender represents. So our definition of women encompasses both transgender and cisgender individuals. And I also want to be very clear that we have an intersectional approach to our work, meaning that we recognize the existence of multiple systems of oppression, such as white supremacy, patriarchy, racism, and colonialism, and that they work in tandem in their in their oppression. And as such, we cannot isolate our work to address only gender equality without considering the other systems in play. So in short, our solutions must work for everyone, including the most vulnerable in our midst, or they won't work at all. So I started SAGE in 2020 to promote gender equality in the global seafood sector, and the need was and still is very great. So globally, this is the often cited statistic. Globally, 1 in 2 seafood workers is a woman. However, there's really little data about the participation and contribution of women in global seafood production. And an issue with data has to do with the fact that most data collected around seafood production is not sex or gender disaggregated. So we know very little about the gender makeup of seafood workforces. So women, we know, are found in all nodes in supply chains from harvest to sales. However, they're predominantly found in post-harvest activities such as processing and marketing, but also pre-harvest activities and informal fishing. So because of this lack of data and invisibility, lack of visibility rather, women's roles are hidden and underestimated, and this creates a kind of a myriad of problems, including a marginalization of women in policy-making decisions and processes, and inequitable flows of government support. So we can't account for what we don't count. So in addition to this lack of gender disaggregated data, women and other strategically excluded people are rarely found in leadership positions. And, SAGE's focus is on the North American seafood industry, where the buying and selling and trade of seafood takes place. And we can count the number of women CEOs at seafood companies probably on one hand and maybe only on 2 fingers. And honestly, I don't know, because we haven't done a count recently. So in terms of aquaculture globally, like I said, 1 in 2 seafood workers is a woman, but the FAO estimates that women's participation in aquaculture is around 70% of the total workforce and includes all production modes. So one of the challenges is that representation matters, right? And one of the challenges is that women and the BIPOC global majority are not represented in leadership, as I said, and their skills and knowledge are not considered when decisions are being made around fish resources and decisions that drive and affect aquaculture production. So another challenge that we face is the lack of progress in improving environmental outcomes. So when there's diversity in leadership, it's been shown that environmental outcomes improve because there's more innovation and less risk. There's less greenwashing. And frankly, there's a better bottom line. So really, diversity in leadership is more profitable. So again, I mentioned about SAGE. We launched in 2020, Seafood and Gender Equality. And we're turning 4 in October, which I'm really excited about. So celebrate us in October. So I'd like to clarify again that the focus of our efforts again is the North American seafood industry, and as opposed to where the harvest or production takes place or processing sector, because we believe that having more diversity in leadership and at the industry level will lead to real positive improvements down the supply chain. That's not to say we won't be working in supply chains at a later date, but we're focused now on the industry. So we have 3 strategies for impact. One is community building and capacity development. Second is education and awareness raising. And the third is gender integration, or mainstreaming gender into all policies, programs, procedures, tools, etc. So we'll talk more about all of our programs here in a second. We have 3 programs, generally 3 flagship programs to implement our strategies. The first one here in the middle is the Bloom, which is a networking community for women and genderqueer people in the seafood sector. And my colleague Cameron will share more about the Bloom shortly. Another program we have here is the Gender Equality Dialogues, or the GED, which my other colleague Becca will share about. And then we have a podcast on the right here called The Conch. I hope you've tuned into it at some point. And this is where I interview people, mostly women, who are really inspiring and doing a lot of cool things in the seafood sector. And we discuss the challenges they face and the triumphs they've achieved, all while working on on improving the environmental sustainability and social responsibility of this most incredible resource, seafood. One more thing I wanted to tell you about, and I encourage everyone to look at this on our website, is the tool we have called the Speakers Bureau for the seafood sector. So if you're interested in finding more speaking opportunities, or if you're if you're a conference organizer who's looking for speakers, please check out our Speakers Bureau. It's on our website. It's free to use. It really just helps speakers find opportunities, and then helps conference organizers find the right experts for their panels or events. And it's free. So please sign up. It's really about creating diverse and inclusive panels, and we love to see it. So finally, I'll mention that we do have another podcast out now called In Hot Water. It's a climate and seafood podcast, and it's kind of an intergenerational podcast where 3 generations hit the road to dive deep into key U.S. seafood producing regions where people are working on fish farms, fisheries, marine conservation, seafood, and we really want to understand what's happening in these places, all under the threat of the global climate crisis. And our first episode's out now on any of your favorite streaming platforms, where we talk to people in the Gulf of Mexico, in the coastal bend of Texas, and we have 3 more to be released soon. So with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Cameron Moore, who's going to tell us about the Bloom. Take it away, Cameron.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. As Julie said, I am Cameron. I am the analyst at Seafood and Gender Equality, which kind of just means I work on a bunch of different programs, specifically the Bloom. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the history of the Bloom, where we started, then talk about some of the challenges and evolutions that we're undertaking, talk to you about where we are now, and then also where we're headed, just in case you're interested in joining us for one of our meetings, which I hope after this session you will. So like Julie said, she founded SAGE in 2020 and came up with this idea to build a networking sessions and capacity buildings for women in the seafood sector. And so we started this. We've been going for just over a year and a half now, just over, I think. And we started with these networking and capacity building professional development sessions for women, specifically women in the seafood sector, and that includes trans women, like Julie said, and also genderqueer people. I am non-binary. I don't identify as a woman, so it's great if you're here and you're non-binary. I would love to connect with you and see you in the bloom. So we had capacity building sessions like imposter syndrome and gender 101. And we noticed people were really enjoying these sessions, but over time we heard from our members that it isn't really professional development that they're looking for or that they needed. It's really that they want to talk one-on-one with individual members, talk as a group. And so um, with all of this information, we started to adapt and pivot and adjust to where we have sessions where the members are just connecting. You know, we have different topics around what we're doing. In our most recent one, we actually had a hobby share to sort of take us outside of the work and start to get each other to know each other more one-on-one and on a personal level, because those connections are really important to build trust and relationships outside of like your professional time, because people can support you in the seafood sector and outside of your professional life. And it has just been really, really awesome. We have women and genderqueer people from all over the world, even though we do primarily work in North America. We have people from all over the world. So while the bloom is mostly North American women, we are encouraging and slowly growing to all over the world. We started with like 50 members and now we're over 150 members and slowly growing. And so our grant cycle is almost up for this, and we are headed to switching it up to about 4 networking sessions a year is where we think we're headed. And so you can join for any of those sessions. And then also in there, we'll sprinkle in some different professional development opportunities, and 2 really exciting events that we have coming up are a fission panel, which is fish fashion, and a Money Smart webinar with the American Association of University Women. And with that, I just want to say we welcome whoever is interested in joining the Bloom, genderqueer people, women, trans women. I'm looking forward to connecting with anybody who is interested in joining. And yeah, I hope to hear from a lot of you. And with that, Julie, I think I can pass it over to Becca.
Thanks a lot, Cameron. Becca, you're up.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be in this space with you. My name is Becca. I use she, her pronouns. I have been with Sage for about a year and a half. And I guess before I get started, I really want to shout out Cameron and Julie's work with the Bloom. It's really an incredible space. And so I hope that I can see y'all in there. So please reach out and join if you have the chance. We'd love to have you. So my role at Sage, I am currently the director of our Gender Strategies program, which includes the Gender Equality Dialogues, or the GED. That's the logo that you see there on your screen. I'm also working to kind of roll out some new consultation services, which is really exciting. That's part of our strategies branch in the next year or so. We're going to start doing some gender assessments and consultations for sustainable seafood companies and nonprofits. So that's likely launching in the next year. But today I'm mostly here to talk about the Gender Equality Dialogues, or our GED program. So in the intro, Julie spoke a bit about gender equity in the seafood sector. I'm sure we all have our own really unique experiences with that, working in this space. The GED was really formed out of this need to see more diverse voices in leadership and decision-making roles. So there was a large-scale study that was conducted by Women in Seafood in 2018 They were a nonprofit organization. They've since closed their doors, but they did this large-scale survey. And that survey talked about people's perceptions and experiences with gender equality in the space. And it pointed to the need for dialogue to promote the type of change that we're talking about here. And specifically, the need for dialogue around really intentional, measurable, and actionable policy and attitude change within company operations. So we built the GED to promote the increased gender awareness, some analysis, and ultimately some gender action to make the industry a more equitable space. So we launched the program in August of last year. So we just wrapped up the pilot program, which is really exciting. And I'm going to share a bit with you more about the process and some of the outcomes that we saw. So we began with 3 seafood companies. We worked with human resources reps and as well as sustainability folks from each of these companies. And we met once a month for the span of a year. And the intention of that was for us to align on the issues and to develop public-facing commitments. And so those commitments you can see on our website. It took us quite a bit of time to figure out exactly what we were as a group going to commit to as it relates to gender equality in their companies and the change that we hope to see come about as a result of these commitments. We also worked with the companies to design really specific, tailored internal facing commitments. So that meant that each company, in addition to agreeing to the public commitments that we put forth, they were also working on something specific to their own operations. So whether that was revising a policy or looking at the ways that implicit bias affects hiring and retention in their company, we worked with them to sort out how they were going to do that. So I would say the main parts of our curriculum and focus, and this changed, we were really flexible and iterative. The big idea was that the companies would also be able to collaborate and co-design the space. So it felt like they were really a massive part of this process. So we spent a lot of time talking about what being gender transformative meant. And that was challenging. You know, it involves looking at some of the deep systems and structures that influence company culture and the ways in that which those structures really uphold big things like patriarchy, white supremacy, and capitalism, and how that can impact people on their day-to-day operations. We also spent a lot of time talking about intersectionality and the idea that people who have different identities and different lived experiences might experience the company culture in different ways. And how can we make sure that we are listening to them and providing equitable solutions to the issues that they raise? One of the other challenges was that we really wanted to understand kind of what exactly was going on in these companies, because I think a lot of times when people think about gender equality from a human resources standpoint, the answer can sort of be just, if we just add women and stir, like we'll get there. Like if we just have a little bit more women in leadership, and while we fully support that, we also understand that it takes a lot more work to get there. And there's a lot more involved in terms of that. Julie, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So these are some of the key takeaways and insights from our pilot program that you can take a look at. We broke the curriculum down into 3 phases. So the first phase was about gender awareness. So sort of building that muscle for folks to be able to talk about what gender equality is, what equity is, how does it look for them. And then we moved into gender analysis, which is building out those public-facing commitments. I'm really proud of the work that we did in the public-facing commitments, so I really do encourage you to take a look at our website and check them out for yourself. They're really amazing. And then the third part was gender action, so developing those internal-facing commitments. I think one of the biggest challenges that we faced in general, and I've given an entire presentations on this one challenge, so I will try and keep it concise for y'all here, is that a lot of these companies really wanted to know what the business case was, why they should join, what ROI they were going to see, if they were going to see a boost in profits by joining, like why should they take the time and effort to focus on gender equality, how was it going to serve them in their company structure. We spent a lot of time talking about this in our group, and we learned a lot. We learned that there's not really a precedence for the business case for gender equality in this specific part of the seafood supply chain that we were looking at, which is primarily with seafood distribution companies. So we were it felt like starting from scratch, specifically in the seafood sector. And then we kind of talked about gender equality being, as a lot of us in this space know, just the right thing to do. So do we really need a business case to justify doing something that is inherently good and should be something that we had been focusing on kind of all along as we were building out these corporate structures? So we decided to work with a preamble or a hypothetical at the beginning of our public commitments that basically stated, if we take on these challenges, if we look at promoting gender equality in our policies and in our operations, we hope that we can see, a boost in innovation and creativity, diverse forms of leadership and decision making, improved retention, and overall improved kind of employee well-being and happiness. So that's kind of what we landed on with the business case. I would say the main takeaways for me, again, these are the 4 key takeaways that we have from the program. But one of the biggest things was that each company, so 100% of the participating companies, began to take action around gender equality before the program even ended. And some of the companies already saw some changes happening, and that's really, really incredible. And that's one of the reasons why we're super excited to be able to continue this program into the next couple of years. The other thing that we realized was it's really important for these groups across companies to build cohesion and to build rapport in the space so that they can trust one another and so that they can trust Sage and the process of talking about something that can be really difficult to talk about. So we took a lot of time to build relationship within the GED, and that was incredibly beneficial. Pretty much every participant said that that was one of the most important things for them throughout the process. And then lastly, one of the biggest things we learned was that joining the GED really served as a market differentiator. So in addition to this understanding that, encouraging a diversity in thought boosts innovation, there's also this idea around workforce development. So companies are really interested in hiring and retaining super high quality employees who will make a difference. And that the way to do that is to make their company as appealing and as attractive as possible. And that includes considering gender equality in every one of their operations and policies that they have. So to wrap up, our next GED cohort is starting in January. We're really excited about it. And we are currently in the recruitment process there. So if you all are interested, if you want to learn more, if you think this would be a great thing for you or your company to join, please reach out. We are happy to speak with you more. If you're also like, I don't know how to talk to my company about this, we can work with you to develop like a sort of pitch if you're wanting to do this. And if you have any questions about anything that I shared in general, or if you just want to chat, please feel free to reach out. So I will pass it back to Julie now.
Thank you, Becca. And I think Cameron and Becca, if you could drop your emails into the chat, that would be amazing. I think everyone can see it. If not, we'll make sure and get our emails posted somehow. Oops, sorry. So I'm really excited to introduce Daisy Berg again from New Seasons Market. And so Daisy, take it away.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here for the 2nd year in a row. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Daisy Berg. I work for a regional grocer called New Seasons Market in the Portland metro area in Oregon. We were founded in 2000, and the idea behind the company is to be a regional grocer that supports the local food economy. And for seafood, what that means in the Pacific Northwest is local seafood and wild seafood. A lot of it coming from Oregon, Washington, some from British Columbia, and even more from Alaska. It didn't really have a big base in aquaculture. I've been with the company for 18 years. And in those 18 years, not only have I evolved, but the industry has evolved. So grocery and the seafood industry have both been historically very homogenous groups of people, tending to be more on the male side, and especially when we get into the higher level positions. In production, there was always an attraction not only in grocery and seafood and in the seafood departments for women, but once you get into the higher levels of the organization, they were more male dominated. Like I said, I have changed while in this industry. I was very wild seafood focused, and through some pushing from various leaders of the company, I was asked to look at aquaculture as something that we needed to bring in to our lineup. I pushed back for many, many years, and then I wasn't allowed to push back anymore. I had to look for something that would fit our sustainable guidelines, our criteria. And what I found in aquaculture, and particularly in the salmon industry, was a massive shift and a massive change towards environmental sustainability, responsible sourcing, responsible raising, in every single portion of it, whether it was the way that the fish were being raised, the feed that was being used for the fish, and really an opportunity for not just, an opportunity to feed a growing world, but an opportunity for women in a very new and exciting sector. I became an advocate for aquaculture, a convert, if you will. And in doing so, I have met not only amazing women at every single level, but I have felt completely uplifted in this work. I have met people not only working within aquaculture groups, but within the feed sector and biomar, that are completely encouraging. And we are seeing a shift in the industry, which is really exciting. There's absolutely opportunity for change, not only within the seafood sector, but within grocery as well. And it's exciting times. Aquaculture has changed, and now it's time for those boardrooms, the tables, the faces are starting to change. I've had more interesting conversations over the last 4 or 5 years, and I would like to commend Sage for what Julie and Becca and Cameron and the entire group has done to bring some different voices to the table. I have one-on-one conversations with younger people that are getting into the industry, of all genders, and they're seeing a change as well, and they're seeing an excitement and an integration of different voices, and I find that really exciting. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say, except that I'm just really thankful for this group and for what you all have done, and for the young folks that are coming into the industry, and asking to be a part of it and have a voice. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Daisy, I have a question for you. I'm going to switch to a slide that says Q&A on it, and we are going to go to Q&A in a second for the audience, but I do have a question or two that I want to ask. And so Daisy, I really wanted to ask you, like, you thanked us and Sage, and Cameron shared about the Bloom, our networking community, and I know you're a part of that, and I want to encourage the audience to consider joining that, because it's pretty awesome. And if you could give us a few examples of how the Bloom has been kind of, I don't know, motivational or inspirational in your life, that would be super helpful, I think.
Right. Yeah. So like I said earlier, I've been in this industry for a very long time. I actually started when my dad started a company back in the 80s. So I was 8 years old, and, riding around in his pickup truck and delivering seafood to restaurants and the like. So this many years, and seeing as much change as I have, both good and bad, has been really interesting. What I've gained from the Bloom are connections with people that have shared my experience, And also people that are very new into it, and are coming up against challenges, that are pretty difficult to face. I've seen it, I've been there, I've experienced almost all of them. And I feel very lucky to be able to share that experience with other women in the group, in the Bloom. I've also found new products. I've found an amazing Tombo tuna through one of the members. We had a great connection. I've had other, offshoot conversations with people that I've met through some of our breakout sessions. And I've been able to introduce new people into the Bloom from some of the speaking engagements that I've been involved at. Met some people that are kind of younger people that are looking for a career path. And I encourage them to join us just to learn what the seafood industry has to offer. It is an industry that has held my attention for well over 30 years, going on 40, because there are so many different avenues for it. And what's great about the Bloom is you get to learn about not just, what I'm doing as a buyer. I'm not just engaging with buyers or salespeople. I'm engaging with people that are working on the science side and on nonprofits, that are working in advocacy for the ocean, which is just a little bit outside of seafood. And it really gives me a better view of the industry and a better view of the world. So very, very, very happy to be a part of the Bloom.
Thank you. I couldn't find the button. Thank you so much, Daisy, for that insight. And yeah, I do want to really stress that this is, it's regardless of where you find yourself in kind of a supply chain or in a nonprofit working on conservation, you're welcome. And because we do find that people, even if you start out at a nonprofit, you might eventually find yourself at a seafood, working on a farm. You might find yourself working at a seafood processing facility. So people change jobs all the time, and it's really great to make these connections and kind of just, again, enter the workforce or be a more experienced person in the workforce and moving forward. So I am super excited to open the floor. I wanted to say quickly about our emails will be available on the website when this is all posted on at the end in a couple days. So you can find our emails there. And I'm ready to go and transition to some Q&A from the audience. I'm going to actually put up our website. It's seafoodandgenderequality.org. And I'm very excited to take some questions with the help of Jean from the audience.
Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you to Sage team. Sorry. Thank you, Becca. Thank you, Daisy. Thank you, Cameron. We don't currently have any audience questions right now, but maybe as we kind of start talking about Sage and your work, we'll be able to kind of spark some questions from the audience. I personally have some curiosities as well, so maybe I'll be a little bit selfish right now and ask some questions myself. But first of all, I want to say congrats to 4 years to the Sage team. Congratulations. It's a big milestone.
Thank you very much.
Julie, maybe I'll ask you the first question in terms of, since the establishment of Sage, like what were the lessons learned and how did it change from your first, I guess, iteration of it?
That's a really great question. And it has slowly, I think, evolved over time. We are thinking more about, at first it was just me. And then, of course, over the past kind of, I guess, year and a half, almost 2 years, we brought on Cameron and Becca. And I think it's my view of things has gone from being very narrow because it was just what was in my brain, right, to expanding a little bit into, again, more of a intergenerational exposure, right, of thoughts and things that are happening in the world. Because as an older person, I have gone through some, a lot in this sector, and just learning from new people coming in is super exciting for me. And I absolutely welcome that and appreciate that. Just like Daisy mentioned, why the Bloom is so great, because there's so many different voices from different experiences as well as different ages, right? And so getting those different points of view has been really important. And that's kind of been an evolution, right? Going from just, again, me to expanding it into some people. One thing I'm really excited about, I mentioned the podcast In Hot Water. I think in my mind, climate change is something that I was not thinking about as much 4 years ago. And it's really, my thinking has evolved because I actually consider it one of the most critical things that we're experiencing right now. And I think it would, it's a real time for reflection. I think, especially in a fish farming or aquaculture atmosphere, like what is happening, what's going to happen to your production or to your communities, where you are, these frontline communities when it, under this threat of the global climate crisis. So I encourage everybody to think about that. And obviously the podcast is amazing. We dive deep into these regions and talk about the themes and, talk about things that they're experiencing, but also themes that emerge. But I think that everyone, it warrants more thought individually and organizationally and as a community. How are we going to address these needs going forward? And for me, that was a real revelation, because, and I'll say a word and then I'll stop, but I was thinking about how is Sage working on or contributing to kind of solutions around the climate crisis. And our website only says climate once, on there. And so I was thinking, well, what are we doing? And then I realized, empowering women and girls is a climate solution, and that is Sage's mission. So we are, as such, a climate organization. And that was a real realization for me. Anyway, Cameron, did you have something that your hand went up for a second?
Sorry, Cameron, before you add, Julie, I wonder if we can take down the slide here so that we can see everyone's faces.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, no
Of
problem.
course. Stop share. There we go. Perfect.
Cameron, go ahead.
My hand went up on accident, I think.
Oh, okay.
But
Well,
yeah, I just want to emphasize everything Julie was saying about the climate crisis, and seeing that the work that we're doing becoming more intersectional is really inspiring. And I think that's a really important piece that we're starting to connect our work to, is climate. So yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I would
absolutely.
also like to commend the organizers of the summit for the panels that are happening after this. I am excited to watch those recordings. Unfortunately, I can't stay because I'm at a meeting, but I am excited to hear from these just amazing people that are doing amazing things in different parts of the world and learn more from them. So really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Cameron, actually, while I have you, maybe I'll ask you a question about the Bloom. I wanted to get you to kind of elaborate a little bit more about that importance of connection and networking within the aquaculture community. You mentioned before in your presentation how women that were participating in the Bloom weren't really looking for any sort of professional development more than they are kind of just trying to connect with other professionals in the industry. So can you talk a little bit about that and how that kind of helped evolve the Bloom in a way?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. So that evolution was super, super interesting, I think, for me and Julie, right? We were sort of like developing our programming and seeing like, okay, we took our initial survey to see who is interested in what, and like what can we bring in. And we sort of saw our numbers dwindling, and we were like, what is going on? Like, people in the survey, people were talking about how like they want to learn more about gender and like money and like all of these things that are, we can bring in speakers to talk about. But then with those numbers dwindling, we were like, okay, how can we assess and make sure that this space is really like beneficial and like worthwhile space for people to be in? And so we were talking to our members, and what's really great about it is like we come into a space and it's not like, okay, we are here and we're talking at our members. It's everybody comes in and we're having conversations. And so with that, we're hearing like, okay, people don't need this professional development. There's so many, women's like empowerment and women's, like we're trying to uplift these people. And when all they really want is to have a space to come together, to talk to other women and genderqueer people, to see what they're up to, like, and so with that transition, we're starting to have more smaller breakout groups discussions. And I think this goes back to exactly what Daisy was saying about like bringing in new products to new seasons. Things like that are happening all the time at the Bloom, right? Like we go into these breakout rooms and you have a connection about, I don't know, somebody likes to bake sourdough bread. We heard about that at our last event. And so like, how is that sourdough bread going to like connect with other people in the seafood sector? Okay, that's a little bit weird, but with that, you get to see what people are doing with their outside life. And then with those breakout sessions, you just get to know more and more people. And slowly throughout time and coming back to each session, you get to recognize people's faces. And with that, I think people are just starting to build community within the seafood sector in our space. And that's really our goal, is the community and capacity building. And that's what the Bloom is all about. Yeah.
Yeah, I would also add, I think, I don't know if we mentioned, but we do have a really robust WhatsApp chat, like between that is available for the members between meetings. And we have like sub chats around jobs and, job opportunities and what else? Events. So if if someone's going to go to the Boston Seafood Show, for instance, or if they're going to go to, I don't know what another event would be somewhere, like the climate week in New York, like that's kind of random, but you know what I mean, like different events around the world. And so finding other people, other members that are going to be at these events is something that we have these chats that are happening, and people are, hey, I need this. Does anyone have this? Help me with this, and asking questions. And it's actually really helpful and it's really cool. So yeah, I encourage everybody to join. I think it's great. And Cameron, that was a great job kind of reviewing like how we evolved it to be a little bit more of a networking group as opposed to a professional development group.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. And I think like you said, the WhatsApp group chat is absolutely incredible. Thank you for mentioning that. And yeah, we have the jobs, we have events that are happening. So that's where we're post things like we're going to the seafood show. We also have a Sea Queers, LGBTQ plus people in seafood. And then also we call it the sandwich generation. It's basically if you have or needing to take care of elderly parents or any elderly family members, there's a space to ask questions about that too. So wherever you are in your life, there's a space for it in the Bloom.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said there in terms of, visibility and representation, in a sense where we're not just seeing like-minded people or like people on the podium or on our screen during these formal events, but we want to make sure that these communities are also accessible. Your role models can be accessible through community networks like this. We have a question or it's not really a question from the audience, but I think it's a really good point for Becca here to talk about the GED program. And she wanted to hear a couple of examples of the impact of the program has had in company policies, and sort of what are some tangible results that you can expect with the program.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a lot of the companies were hesitant to publicly share what it is exactly that they're doing internally. So I won't necessarily be able to go into that. You can see in the public facing commitments that they do take a pretty good stand on things like reducing implicit and unconscious bias in hiring and retention, as well as making policies more gender transformative. So some policies that we look into as part of the curriculum are like succession planning, so how folks are being moved up and around the organization. We also look at pay equity and under pay gap, which means that even if you pay people the same for the same type of work that they're doing, if you have more men in leadership positions than you have women, then there's going to be a pay gap if you look at the info disaggregated by gender. So we look at that. We also look at parental leave policies. So how can we make that gender transformative in terms of offering, going above and beyond compliance? I think that's really the point that I tried to drive home with a lot of the GED participants, is that when we look at gender equality, we have to first understand what equity is. And if we're just looking at being compliant with the current company policies or the state laws, that's really a baseline. And we need to build on that to make the atmosphere, the environment, the company culture really transformative. So if people have, a 2-week maternal leave policy, for example, we would want to make that into a parental leave policy that extends to everybody who's in a parenting role, and look at the ways that people are being kind of brought back into the company when they return, and looking at different metrics around that, as well as providing mentorship opportunities, that sort of thing. So it's a lot of kind of building and layering that happens.
Great, thank you so much. I know that we're coming up on our time here, but I thought this was Marcy, an audience member, asked a really good question in terms of the GED program, and how is there a follow-up built into these programs, and how do we kind of hold these companies accountable when they're participating in these programs?
Amazing question. Again, accountability is something that we talk about a lot, in terms of the companies being accountable to themselves and their employees, and also being accountable to the sector as a whole. So we built out a framework. It took us like a year to build this out. It's really extensive, and it takes the public facing commitments, and kind of breaks them down into different focal areas, and then provides ideas of metrics, timelines, actions that people can take, data that they can run, retention rates, how they can assess that, looking at pay equity analyses, and offers them sort of a map of how they want to do that in the next 3 to 5 years. We will be meeting with this first cohort quarterly for the first year after the program ended. So the program ended in July. So we're going to meet quarterly for this first year, kind of all together, and check in on their progress. And then we'll meet twice a year in the second year after that. And then we'll meet once the third year after that. We're also working on building out a portal so that members can join our online kind of membership portal, and cohort members can talk to each other and kind of get information on how did you handle this when it came to hiring for a new C-level or C-suite level person, and how did you make that gender equitable or whatever it is. And then also enabling new members to join and kind of hear from the folks who've already been through the program. So we have a couple things in place. And these companies are early adopters and innovators, and they really want to do a good job with this. So we're definitely keeping our eye out on them.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you, Becca, and thank you to the rest of the Sage team for being with us here today and sharing about their story and their work. I'm sure you'll be hearing from them again very soon with all of their amazing busy projects. They're keeping busy for sure. But thank you so much again for being a part of our WINNA Summit today.